The handcuffs clicked shut around Julian's wrists, right there in the middle of a five-star steakhouse. His parents were screaming. The city's elite were staring. And me? I just stood there watching the man I was supposed to marry being dragged out like a common criminal. But let me tell you something. That sound, that beautiful metallic click of those cuffs, it wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. My name is Maya, and 3 days before that moment, I was standing in a coat closet at my own engagement party, holding a white envelope that would change everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the man sleeping next to me every single night. Before I take you deeper into this nightmare, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that the truth always finds a way to catch up with liars, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let me take you back to where it all started falling apart. The engagement party was Julian's idea. Of course it was. Everything had to be his idea. He picked the venue. Some historic manor that cost more to rent for 4 hours than what I paid for my first car. He handpicked the guest list. Only the best people. Only the right connections. He wanted champagne that cost more than most people's rent. He wanted lilies flown in from somewhere exotic. And me? I stood in the middle of that ballroom, feeling like I was suffocating. See, to everyone else in that room, Julian was the prize. Tall, handsome, the kind of face that made people stop their conversations mid-sentence when he walked in. He was supposed to be this rising star in architectural design, this visionary, this man with a plan. My parents adored him. My friends were jealous of me, and I genuinely believed that I had found the one person in this world who actually saw me for who I really was. I was a senior researcher at a biotech firm. I spent my days analyzing data, looking at cold, hard facts, evidence, proof. But when it came to Julian, I had completely turned off my brain. I was so blinded by the way he looked at me, or at least, the way I thought he looked at me. But my mother? She wasn't blinded at all. My mom, Nora, is a retired librarian. She spent 40 years watching people, reading their faces, catching the tiny shifts in their expressions that they didn't even know they were making. And for 3 whole years of my relationship with Julian, she had been polite but distant. She never joined in when people praised his ambition. She never gushed over his vision. She just watched him, quietly, carefully, like she was waiting for something. That night at the engagement party, Julian took the microphone for a toast. He talked about our future, the empire we would build together. How I was his anchor, his rock, his everything. People cheered. My father beamed with pride. But when Julian leaned in to kiss my cheek, his hand was ice cold, and it was shaking. Something wasn't right. I told him I needed a moment. I started walking toward the terrace to get some air. But before I could reach the glass doors, a hand grabbed my elbow and pulled me back. It was my mother, and her face was whiter than I had ever seen it. She didn't say a word. She just dragged me into this tiny coat closet near the hallway. The smell of cedar and wool was everywhere, suffocating. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a thick white envelope. Maya listened to me very carefully. Her voice was trembling. Don't marry him. Do not sign a single piece of paper with that man. Do not walk down that aisle. I thought she was being dramatic. I thought maybe she was worried about wedding costs or something stupid like that. But then she shoved that envelope into my hands. She told me she had a feeling, a mother's intuition, she called it. She said she saw some mail sitting on my kitchen counter last week when I was at work. There was a logo on one of the envelopes that she didn't like, so she made a call. She had a friend at the credit bureau. She asked for a favor. She knew she probably shouldn't have, but she did it anyway. I opened that envelope with numb fingers. Inside were pages and pages of credit reports, loan summaries, numbers and dates and signatures. And then I saw it. $127,450. My breath just stopped. I tried to rationalize it. Julian has student loans, I told myself. He mentioned something about that before. Maybe this is just a mistake, but my mother's voice cut through my denial like a knife. Look at the names, Maya. Look at the primary borrower. I looked, and there it was. My name, Maya Elena Vance. 3 separate business development loans. One for $50,000, one for $40,000, and then a whole series of smaller, high-interest personal loans on top of that. All of them taken out over the last 18 months. All of them using my social security number, my employment history, my perfect credit score. The signatures at the bottom of those digital forms looked exactly like mine, but I knew with everything inside me that I had never signed any of those documents. I had never even heard of these lending companies before. My mother's eyes were filling with tears as she said it. He used you, Maya. He didn't just use your heart. He's been systematically gutting your future to fund this brand he's so obsessed with. That car he drives? Paid for by a loan in your name. This party we're standing in right now? The deposit came from a credit line you didn't even know existed. The music from the ballroom suddenly sounded like it was coming from underwater. Everything was spinning. I looked through the crack in that closet door, and there was Julian, standing there in his $5,000 suit, holding a glass of vintage scotch, looking like the king of the entire world. And all of it, every single piece of it, was built on my stolen identity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run out there and smash that glass against his perfect teeth. I wanted to expose him in front of everyone who had ever called him charming, everyone who had ever told me how lucky I was. But something inside me shifted. The scientist in me took over, the part of me that analyzed pathogens, that looked for weaknesses in structures, that knew how to take something apart piece by piece. If I confronted him right now in front of all these people, he would lie. That's what he did best. He would say it was a temporary measure. He would claim he was doing it for us. He would promise he was going to pay it all back before I ever found out. He would charm my father, gaslight my mother, and somehow make me look like the crazy one. No, if I was going to destroy this man who had stolen my identity and my trust, I couldn't just make a scene. I needed a complete and total collapse of everything he had built. I tucked that envelope into the waistband of my dress. Hidden in the folds of the fabric, I looked my mother dead in the eyes. Don't say a word. Go back out there. Smile. Act like nothing happened. She looked at me like I had lost my mind. Maya, you have to stop this, she pleaded. I'm stopping it, I told her. But I'm not just stopping the wedding. I'm going to make sure he never does this to anyone else ever again. I walked out of that closet feeling like a ghost, like I was floating through a crowd of living people who had no idea they were celebrating a funeral. Julian found me near the bar. His eyes were bright with success and champagne. There you are, he said, pulling me close. My future father-in-law was just asking about honeymoon plans. I told him we were thinking about the Maldives. Only the best for my queen, right? He reached out and put his hand on my waist, the exact spot where that envelope full of secrets was hidden against my skin. I didn't flinch. I forced myself to smile. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. The Maldives sounds perfect, Julian, I said sweetly. But I was thinking maybe we should do something even more special. Something people will really remember. He ate it up. Anything you want, babe, he said. He had absolutely no idea that the trap was already being set. Now here's where things get really interesting. Because that $127,000 in loans, that was just the surface. That was just the tip of a very dark and very deep iceberg. That night, after the party, Julian fell asleep like a baby, snoring softly, the peaceful sleep of a man without a conscience. But I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness of our living room with my laptop open, and I started digging. By 4 a.m, I found the second layer of rot. Julian wasn't just an architect with a spending problem. He was a complete and total fraud. He had been fired from his previous firm for ethical violations, and that happened a full month before we even met. He wasn't a rising star. He was a blacklisted professional who had been using my credentials and my reputation to get freelance consulting gigs this whole time. But wait, it gets worse. He had set up a shell company. Guess what he named it? Vance and Associates. My last name. He had listed me as the chief financial officer on paper, without my knowledge, without my permission. This wasn't just debt anymore. This was a legal minefield. If any of his consulting work went wrong, I was the one who would get sued. I was the one who could go to prison. I looked at him sleeping on those designer sheets I had bought him for his birthday. He looked so innocent, so handsome, and I whispered into the darkness of that room, "You think you've won, Julian, but you just handed me the blueprints to your own destruction." The first call I made was to my sister Elena. She's a forensic accountant, the kind of person people call when they want to find money that's been buried under 10 layers of concrete. I told her I needed her to look at something, and I told her not to tell Dad. Not yet. For the next week, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the devoted fiancé, discussing flower arrangements, picking out table settings, smiling at Julian like nothing was wrong. But at night, I was a ghost in my own home, forwarding every bank statement, every digital footprint, every forged document straight to my sister. On the third day, Elena called me back. Her voice was sharp, professional, the way she gets when she smells blood in the numbers. "Maya, it's worse than the loans," she said. "I traced the money from Vance and Associates. He isn't just using your name to get loans. He's using your company to launder consulting fees from developers who are cutting corners on their buildings. He's signing off on structural safety reports using a digital stamp of your signature." She paused to let that sink in. "If one of those buildings has a leak, or God forbid a collapse, you are the one the city comes for. Not him. You." I felt the blood drain from my face. He was putting actual lives at risk just to fund his lifestyle. Elena told me he had built a firewall of debt and legal liability around himself, and he was using me as the human shield. If he defaulted on these loans, the banks would sue me. If the city found out about the fraudulent safety reports, the DA would indict me. I needed a way out. Not just a breakup, a total wipeout. Elena had a plan. She told me not to close any of the accounts yet. If I did that, he would run. We needed to wait for what she called the big one. Apparently, Julian was waiting for a massive payout from a developer called the Blackwood Group, a 7-figure contract, and he was planning to use my name to finalize the deal that Friday. That was the same day as our engagement celebration dinner with both families. Julian had reserved a table at the most expensive steakhouse in the city. He told everyone he had a massive announcement to make. Now I knew exactly what that announcement was going to be. He was going to reveal the Blackwood deal, a deal built entirely on my stolen reputation. And then he would use that success to justify even more spending, even more loans, even more theft. So I played along. But I added one extra guest to the dinner list. I called a contact I had made years ago through my work, a high-level investigator at the state licensing board. I told him I had a tip about a fraudulent architectural firm operating under the name Vance and Associates. The pieces were falling into place. The days leading up to that Friday dinner were a masterclass in acting. Julian was floating on cloud 9. He bought me diamond earrings, probably using a credit card he had just opened in my name. I wore them anyway. I let him kiss me. I let him ramble on about our empire. But behind his back, I was working with the bank's fraud department. I was meeting with police. I was building a case that would bury him. See, I had to prove that I didn't know about those loans, and the only way to do that was to catch him trying to use my identity in real time. Friday finally arrived. The steakhouse was dimly lit. It smelled like aged oak and expensive cigars. My parents were there looking uncomfortable. Julian's parents were there looking smug. And Julian himself stood at the head of the table like a man who had already conquered the world. He raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he announced. His voice boomed with confidence. "Maya and I are starting a new chapter. not just as a couple, but as a powerhouse in this city. And tonight I'm proud to announce that Vance and Associates has officially secured the Blackwood contract. His parents clapped. My father looked confused. He turned to me. Maya, I didn't know you were involved in architecture. Before I could respond, Julian jumped in. Oh, Maya is the brains behind the scenes. She handles the technical side. In fact, he smiled that crooked smile of his. I have the final authorization papers right here. Just a digital signature on this tablet, babe, and the first installment of $200,000 hits our account tonight. He slid a tablet across the white tablecloth toward me. Everyone was watching. This was the moment he expected me to blindly sign away my future to cover all his previous thefts. I picked up the tablet. I looked at the contract, and there it was in black and white. I was listed as the sole liable party for any errors or omissions. Julian, I said quietly, there's something wrong with this. Just a glitch, babe. Sign it so we can order the champagne. No, I said louder this time. I stood up from the table. The chair scraped against the floor. I mean, there's something wrong with you. The table went dead silent. Julian's smile flickered for just a second before he recovered. Maya, don't be like this. Not in front of everyone. You're just nervous. I'm not nervous, Julian. I'm disgusted. I reached into my bag and pulled out that white envelope, the one my mother had given me a week ago, and I threw it right into the center of the table. It landed on top of his expensive steak. Why are there $127,000 in loans under my name that I never applied for? His face went from pale to something almost translucent. He tried to grab that envelope, but my father was faster. He snatched it up and started reading. His eyes got wider with every page. What is this? My father demanded. His voice was shaking with rage. Julian started sputtering. It's a mistake. It's a consolidated business loan. Maya knew about it. She just forgot. I forgot that my social security number was used to buy your Porsche. I stepped closer to him. I forgot that you've been forging my name on structural safety reports for buildings you're not even licensed to design. He grabbed my arm. His mask was slipping. Maya, stop, he hissed. You're making a scene. We can talk about this at home. There is no home, Julian. I pulled my arm away from him. I changed the locks 2 hours ago, and I've already spoken with the Blackwood Group. They were very interested to learn that Vance and Associates is a fraudulent entity. That's when I saw them. 2 men in plain suits walking toward our table. One was the investigator from the licensing board. The other was a detective I had met with that same morning. Julian Thorne, the detective asked. Julian tried one last time. He tried to use that charming smile. Officers, there's been a massive misunderstanding. My fiancé is just having a bit of a breakdown. Save it for the station, the detective said. And then came that sound. That beautiful sound I will never forget as long as I live. Click, click. The handcuffs closed around his wrists. Julian's parents started screaming. My mother grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. And Julian, the man who was supposed to be my forever, he was dragged out of that 5-star restaurant in front of everyone who mattered. His brand, his empire, his entire carefully constructed lie, shattered into a million pieces right there on the marble floor. The week after Julian's arrest felt like waking up from a fever dream. I spent the first 2 days with Elena and a team of lawyers going through every single digital shadow Julian had left behind. And trust me when I tell you, the man was thorough in his pettiness. Elena showed me how he had been redirecting my automatic bill payments into a secret holding account. And then he would use that money to pay for his gym membership and his country club dues. He was literally stealing my electricity and water money to fund his lifestyle. It was so pathetic it almost made me laugh. But the real fight was just starting. Because even though I had caught him red-handed at that restaurant, even though I had stopped the Blackwood deal from going through, that $127,000 in debt was still legally tied to my name. The bank's first response was cold. The signatures are digital, ma'am, and they come from your home IP address. From our perspective, this looks like a domestic dispute, not identity theft. I wanted to scream at them, but instead I got to work. I spent the next month gathering what I called life evidence. I contacted the biotech firm where I worked. I got logs of every single minute I had been logged into their secure servers. Then I matched those timestamps against the timestamps of every loan application. And you know what I found? Every single loan had been submitted while I was in the middle of high-level lab research. Times when I didn't even have access to my personal phone, let alone a laptop to apply for credit. But here's the part Julian really didn't account for. His precious brand was built on vanity. And vanity always leaves a trail. I went through every single one of his social media posts. All those candid shots of him at expensive lunches and luxury showrooms. I mapped every single location tag. On the day the largest loan of $50,000 was approved, Julian had posted a photo of himself at a luxury watch boutique. The location tag said he was across town. The photo was posted at 2:20 in the afternoon, but the loan was signed from our home Wi-Fi at 2:15. Unless I had suddenly developed the power to teleport, I could not have been in two places at once. Meanwhile, Julian was playing victim from behind bars. He sent me letters, handwritten desperate things. He claimed he did it all for us. He said he wanted to give me the life I deserved. He promised he was going to pay everything back once the big firms finally recognized his genius. I didn't read a single one of them. I handed every letter directly to the district attorney, because every word he wrote was a confession. The day of the hearing finally came. Julian sat at the defense table. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. He looked small. He looked like exactly what he was, a fraud. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge. I talked about what I called the invisible debt, not just the money, but the debt of trust. I explained how he hadn't just stolen my credit score. He had tried to steal my entire future just so he could build a pedestal for himself. The judge was a stern woman who had clearly seen 1,000 charmers just like Julian in her courtroom. She looked at all the evidence Elena and I had compiled, the timestamps, the location tags, the forged digital stamps. Then she turned to Julian. "Mr. Thorne, you speak of vision and ambition, but what I see is a man who lacked the talent to build his own life, so he decided to dismantle someone else's. You didn't just borrow money. You committed a calculated predatory assault on the identity of the person you claim to love." The verdict was swift. Julian was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. Identity theft, grand larceny, multiple counts of forgery. But even more importantly for me, the judge issued a court order declaring every single one of those loans fraudulent and void. The debt was gone. I walked out of that courthouse into the crisp afternoon air. My father was waiting for me. He hugged me for a long time. "I'm sorry I didn't see it, Maya," he whispered. "Nobody saw it, Dad," I told him. That was his only real talent. But he forgot one thing. A house built on a rotten foundation will always eventually collapse. So here I am today. My credit score has completely recovered. Vance and Associates has been legally dissolved, and in its place, I started a scholarship fund for young women entering STEM fields. I never did make it to the Maldives. Instead, I used that time to travel alone, to rediscover the person I was before Julian tried to rewrite my entire story. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from everything I just told you, it's this. Never apologize for looking at the fine print of your own life. We ignore red flags because we want to believe in the vision someone else has painted for us. We think asking questions means we don't trust them. We think checking the accounts makes us paranoid. But real love, true love, it doesn't hide in the shadows of secret loans and forged signatures. Real love is transparent. If someone asks you to sign your future away in the name of us, make sure you are the one holding the pen. And if you ever find a white envelope in your path that tells you the truth you didn't want to hear, don't look away. The truth might break your heart, but it is the only thing that will ever truly set you free. If this story hit close to home, drop a comment below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button so you never miss another story of justice being served. Until next time, stay vigilant and know your worth.